there's definitely an idea of the kedusha of a space. There's no question. There's kedusha in time, and there's holiness in time, and there's holiness in space. Holiness in time is special days, Shabbos, Yom Tov. Holiness in space is special places. Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael, shuls,
house,
right? Study halls, right? That have a greater kedusha than other places. Okay, we're going to finish up Ois Daled. We left 2 lines because I started getting nervous. It was too late yesterday to finish up. So, the Rebbe was talking about the fact that aveiros that are not punishable by curtis, so that is a nick in the rope. And so it might be that a person doesn't feel it. And the last line we saw was Zeh Asiba Chabad Lidei Aveiro Rachmana Litzlan. 3 lines up in the bottom of the first paragraph on page 117. She'ena nirgish etzlei ha'or eloki. Missed the line. Hainu. Haruach shtus, the Sitra Achra, the spirit of folly of the Sitra Achra, which we talked about at great length in the 3rd chapter. Shemechase u'mailim, that it hides and conceals al orda emes, the light of truth. And what does that mean? She'ena nirgish etzlei ha'or eloki. The person doesn't feel godly light. And if a person doesn't feel godly light, what can happen? You can descend midechi el dechi. Dechi is like a one bad place to another bad place. Comes from the idea of litchot, which is to push away. Until he can actually do something that's forbidden, because he's lacking a sensitivity to elokus. Now, it's interesting, when the Rebbe talked about it in the 3rd chapter, he talked about it in terms of not feeling the beauty of the positive commandment, and so therefore I don't feel the disconnect from the negative commandment. Sensitivity to elokus.
What's the Reish Lamed here?
Rachmana litzlan, heaven forfend. V'hu mitzad haruach shtus kanal. Kitzer, yamshich, the ruach shtus mechasa rak al midos the nefesh elokis. The Ruach Shtus covers up only the midas of the Nefesh Elokis, v'lo yalatzmusei, and not its essence, ve'etzem iskashrus, and the essential connection. So in Ois Gimel, the Rebbe told us that the Ruach Shtus is that which makes us believe that this particular action won't separate us from Elokus. That's not true. In Ois Daled, the Rebbe explains exactly what that means to be separated from Elokus. The separation is only happening in the level of the neshama that's clothed in the body and vitalizes the body, but not in any way, shape, or form in the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul is essentially connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and it's always there, and that's why a Jew can always do tshuva. No matter how long a Jew has been disconnected, he's not really disconnected. There's a certain aspect of him that's disconnected, but he himself is not. The essence of who he is not disconnected. Vehine, chapter 5, last chapter. Chapter 3, we started talking about shtus de klipa, the negative shtus, right? That's what we were doing. Now the Rebbe is going to start talking about shtus de kedusha. The slovenly behavior can't continue. Vehine. How many times has Amnon walked in late in the last 8 months? I think, maybe. We certainly don't need our feet to count it, that's for sure. Our hands will definitely suffice, probably 1. V'hinei, kishem sheyesh hataya lamata minadas, just like there is a turning away below intellect, meaning acting in a way that you would say is folly, but meaning stupid, so to speak, right? It's just not a smart thing to do. If a person were to think about it, Shehu nikra b'shem shtus de klipa, and that is the shtus of klipa, which we learned about in chapter 3 at great length. Hine, and when as soon as we ran into shtus, so when the Rebbe said there's shtus de klipa, so I asked you guys what that means, and you all said, well, there must be a shtus de kedusha if there's a shtus de klipa, because if I have to say shtus de klipa, that means there's some other level of shtus, because otherwise just say shtus. And shtus is klipa. No, shtus is not klipa. There is a shtus of klipa. There is a folly that's negative and connects a person to negative reality. There's also a shtus of kedusha. What's that? Vu shtus de kedusha. V'inyan hu dehine amre razal. The Rebbe is going to teach us about the idea of shtus de kedusha from a famous Gemara in Ksuvas. It's a Gemara where the Gemara asks, Ketzad meraktin lifnei akala, how do you dance in front of the kala, which was a fairly common wedding song in non-Lubavitch weddings for many, many years. It might still be, I'm not sure, but for many, for a long time. Ketzad meraktin lifnei akala. There was this song that you don't hear it at Lubavitch weddings, because you tend to hear Lubavitch negunim at Lubavitch weddings, but it's out there, and it's a nice song. And it's a reasonable song to sing at a wedding because you're dancing. Right? How do you dance in front of the kala? How do you celebrate the simcha of a chasna? So, we're going to hear about two people. One in particular. Amar Lavav Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eloi, who was a Tana. Shayaneitel bad shel hadas umeraked lifnei akala. He would take a sprig of a hadas, right? The hadas that we put in with our lulav and esrog, and he would dance in front of the kala. He'd wave it as he danced in front of the kala. That was Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eloi, and he was a Tana. Then he starts telling a story about an Amara. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak meraked atlas. What's tlas? It's a tough in Aramaic. In Hebrew? Three. Right? A tough in Aramaic is a shin in Hebrew. So it's shalosh. Right? Snow in Aramaic is tlug, as opposed to shelig. Right? Okay. Not every word is the same, obviously, but very often a tough can be switched to a shin, and here's a classic example. Right? Tlat. 3. So he would dance with 3. So Rashi explains. Shalosh badim. He had 3 twigs of hadassim. Zorek achas u'mekabel achas. He'd throw one and catch one. He'd juggle. He would juggle the dasim. That's not easy to juggle a dasim because the things that are light. I can't juggle tennis balls either. But you talk to people who juggle, so they'll say that the lighter the thing is, the harder it is because it doesn't move up and down in as uniform a fashion. So juggling hadasim would be pretty good. Okay. So Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak used to juggle hadassim. Rav Zera, we've all heard of, very ubiquitous Amara, started in Bavel, ended up in Eretz Yisrael. That's why at the end of his life he was called Rabbi Zera, because they gave smicha in Eretz Yisrael. There was no smicha in Bavel. So whether he said this when he was young when he said this, because you hear the story, you see he was younger. So that means he was probably still in Bavel. So he's Rav Zera. Amar Rav Zera. Kamach siflan Saba. You're embarrassing us, Saba, old man. You're embarrassing us. Rashi explains, Shemizalzel bekovid Talmidei Chachamim, that he's cheapening the honor and respect of Torah scholars. V'nei kalas reishbats, when he's acting in a lightheaded way. Meaning Pasnis, Rav Zera was not at all happy with the behavior of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak at the Chasna. He didn't think that that's how such a big Talmid Chacham should act, that he should be juggling hadassim in front of a 16-year-old kala. All right? Okay.
Rather than dancing with one.
Well, by the way, Rav Zera wasn't around when he did that, so we don't know how Rav Zera thought about that one. But he didn't like this. All right? Kinach nafshe, when he passed away, when Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak passed away, there was a miracle at his levaya. And what was the miracle? Afsik amuda denara. Afsik, it's separated. Amuda is a pillar. Denara, of fire. There was a pillar of fire that separated Bain Day between him, meaning his body, as he was being taken to his grave, Lekula Alma, to everybody who came to accompany him to his grave. I mean, there was a miracle. There was a pillar of fire that evidently everybody saw. Oh, Rav Zera was at the levaya. And Rav Zera realized that perhaps he had made a mistake regarding Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. And what did Rav Zera say? What is it that was the source of this incredible miracle that happened to Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak at his levaya? So Rav Zera connected it immediately to his behavior at the Chassidus, which the Rebbe will help us understand. Amar Rav Zera. Rav Zera said one of three things. There's three different versions of what Rav Zera said. Every single one of them is based on the root shin tes. Shtus. But lavdavka, we'll see. Everything, every single word. Amar Rav Zera, ahani lei, ahani meaning it was good for him. Hana is benefit. It's beneficial for him, it was good for him. Meaning what caused this? Shoite l'saba, his shoit. A shoit is a sprig, a twig. Shoit shel hadas, the shoit of hadas. Shahaya maraked bay. That's what Rashi explains. Okay, so it was what he did at the wedding. Va'amrile, there are those that say, what did he say? He didn't say shoit, he said shtusei l'saba. His shtus, same verb, same root, I'm sorry. Shayim isnaid k'sheita, they would act like a sheita at the wedding. Va'amrile, there are those that say shitasei, his shita, which we said also is the same root, right? We said that earlier in the Maamer. Shitsei l'saba, his shita, shitasa min hagay. But Rav Zera connected the miracle at the Levaya to Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak's behavior at the Chasnas. Why? Or the Rebbe will explain. I'm sure he did other things that were worthy. The shtus zu, this shtus, arihu l'mayla min hadas, is beyond intellect. What shtus? Shtus is acting in a way that isn't guided by intellect. So that can either be negative or that can be positive. Right? Intellect is a very, very powerful part of our lives, a very sophisticated and impressive power of the soul. But unfortunately, if people worship it, they get themselves in a lot of trouble, right? Because there are many things beyond intellect. Right? A child's relationship with a parent and vice versa is not an intellectual relationship. The child doesn't love the parent because he's come to the intellectual decision that his parent is worthy of his love. He loves his parent because there's a connection that transcends intellect. And as a matter of fact, it might even be, if chas v'shalom, right? Unfortunately, sometimes we learn things from negative reality. Might even be that if the parent is an abusive parent, then intellectually the child understands very, very clearly that he should have nothing to do with this person. That's an extremely difficult thing for the child to do because there's a much more powerful connection that connects the child to the parent that he's going to have to break. So the intellectual understanding is one thing, but breaking that essential connection is much... I mean, he has to. He can't have anything to do with this person. He's an abusive person. That's not so easy for the child to do because there's something beyond intellect. It's obviously behavior that's below intellect. That's what we were just talking about, shtus the kedusha, shtus the klipa. That a person's not acting in an objective and rational way. The difference between... there are many differences, but the most basic difference between emotional reality and intellectual reality is emotional reality is subjective. It's what I feel, and it is what it is. You can't tell me I don't feel it. You might say that feeling's an improper feeling, but I do feel it. Right? That's a subjective reality that is what it is. Intellect is objective reality. 2 + 2 is 4. I'm not really interested in what you feel or think otherwise. 2 + 2 in every mathematical reality above base 4. 2 + 2 is 4. In base 4, so 2 + 2 is 10. Okay. In base 3, 2 + 2 is 11. Okay, fine. But in every other reality, which is generally what we spend our time dealing with, David's so happy that I did this. Like, he's just smiling away like the cat that caught the mouse over there. Right? But every other mathematical system, so 2 + 2 is 4, and that's the way it is. And you want to say it's 5? Okay, good. Fine. Live a fine life, but you'll be overpaying or underpaying or whatever. You're going to mess it up in the supermarket every time you go. Right? Because 2 + 2 is not 5. Just isn't. That's the way it goes. Why? Because there's this convention. There's no such thing as 2, and there's no such thing as 4, and there's no such thing as 5, and there's no such thing as 10. There's this convention called counting things. Really, there's just a bunch of ones There's all these things, right? Okay, but you and I, and God tells us to do this. God tells us, count 10 cows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th one is Kodesh. Put him to the side. He's Meiser Behema. God tells us to do it. There's such a thing called 10 in the Torah. Right? God, there's numbers all over the Torah, right? We just finished a book called Numbers in English. Why is it called Numbers? Well, because it's called Sefer Pekudim, the book of countings by Chazal. The English names of the 5 books of the Torah are the translations of Chazal's name for the books. We call them based on the first word, Bereshis, Shmeis. But Bereshis is called Sefer Yetzirah by Chazal, Genesis. Right? Shmeis is called Sefer Yetzirah or Yetziah or Sefer HaGeula, Exodus. Vayikra is called Teres Kohanim, Leviticus, Levites. Right? The English name is not some, silly thing that someone who doesn't speak Hebrew thought up. No, it's just the translation of how Chazal. So Chazal call B'midbar Sefer Pekudim, the book of countings, because we're counted a bunch of times in the book. So that's why it's called Numbers. Reasonable. Okay, so there's a book in the Torah called Numbers. God made up numbers. God said, you know what? Use numbers. There's such a thing. Okay, fine. But it's just a convention, right? I mean, David will explain to us that if we decided, for whatever reason, that that's not called 4 anymore, that's called 5, so then 2 plus 2 would be 5, right? It just happens to be. We call it 4. Well, we only call it 4 in one language. Right? It's called fear in another language. It's called quatre in another language. It's called quattro in another language, right? But everybody knows you mean that. Right? Okay, fine. That's objective reality. That's intellect. And that's why, and I'm not trying to make friends, though. It just happens to be true. That's why mathematics is probably the single most powerful expression of intellect, because it's just absolute objective reality.
Wow.
That, doesn't necessarily, sometimes it does, obviously, but doesn't necessarily have any practical application, right? Sometimes it does, right? Often it does, but sometimes it doesn't, right? But it doesn't matter. Okay. That's why most people who like studying it tend to be on the intellectual side. Because I think you'd go crazy if you were an intellectual, right? You just go nuts, right? But what am I supposed to feel about this? No, this isn't about feeling. Must be low attendance in American colleges these days in mathematics.
It's also not so diverse. I was probably the only Jewish person in my math class.
Yeah, well, all Chinese?
Yeah, and Indian.
Indian, interesting. Okay, so okay. Well, I grew up with all the Chinese because a huge Chinese population in Vancouver who came from Hong Kong to.
Hey, there were white people in your classes who went to school in Utah. It's not a university.
No, that's very interesting. Right. So when many years ago, when people my age were growing up, so the smartest kids in college were all Jewish, and now they're all Chinese. The Chinese immigrants is an incredibly successful immigrant. The Jews were also an incredibly successful immigrant. Now the Chinese are the new, completely, unbelievably successful immigrants.
Don't worry, the reason why most of the Jewish people in universities more is because we graduated when we were 18.
Right. No. It's because they stopped working hard. Because they felt privileged and so now they're dumbing down. They're still Yidden, and so they still have that essential connection to Seichel of the Nefesh Elokis, but their parents also aren't sitting and reading them books when they're young. They're sitting them in front of machines. So their brains are rotting when they're 5 instead of developing.
I think it's a cultural difference. A lot of these very, very smart Jewish students who a lot of them came from the Soviet Union, from societies that
oh, for sure.
A lot more, so.
Yeah, for sure. It's an immigrant thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's also it's something that a successful immigrant is someone generally who works extremely hard to, so to speak, get ahead. So there are immigrants who are just very, very successful at that. I mean, in Canada, because when China took over Hong Kong, 20, almost 30 years ago, so obviously a lot of people in Hong Kong they hedged their bets. So they stayed in Hong Kong, but they bought property in Vancouver. Why could you buy property in Vancouver? It's the closest place, and it also happened to be connected to the British Commonwealth, which was Hong Kong. So it was that you could get a visa without any problem. So the high school that I went to, which was 2/3 Jewish when I went, is now 3/4 Chinese. Which is fine. I mean, that's okay. They're, law-abiding citizens who add to the whole fabric of what's going on. And they're just the kids who are getting all the top grades and the smartest and the awards and all kol to them. They work hard. Generally, these things happen because people work hard. Very few things happen, no matter what your natural ability, very few things happen if you don't work hard. I don't usually quote basketball players, but when I was growing up, there was a and Shmuel will remember this name, there was a very, very amazing basketball player who was probably the best ever, not because he was any better than anybody else, but he always won. His teams always won. His name was Bill Russell. He was the center of the Boston Celtics, and they just won, always. When he was in college, they won, and when he was a pro, they won. Right? Always. And it wasn't that there wasn't competition, but he just always won. And he was a very, very bright person. His Jewish coach of the Boston Celtics, Red Auerbach, right? They all went to the Levaya. He had a Jewish burial, Red Auerbach. Red Auerbach, Jewish coach, who in those days used to light a cigar on the bench when he decided that the game was over, that his team had won, he would light a victory cigar. Now you can't do that inside anymore, but that was part of the aura of the whole thing. Very, 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 also very bright guy. So he was coaching a team as a Jew in Boston, which is probably the most bigoted city in the United States because it's full of Catholics. And it was the last baseball team to have a black player, the Boston Red Sox, and one of the last basketball teams. So he was a Jew, which itself, they're also not so loved in Boston. So the Jewish coach, and there were black players on the team. And when he retired, what did he do? He did something that you guys might take for granted, but in 1969, this was an unbelievable thing to do. He appointed Bill Russell, the black player, as the next coach. A black coach in Boston? Anyway, he became the player coach of the team. He was an extremely intelligent young man. And he said something amazing that I've quoted to myself many times and in this class a lot. He said, if blacks are natural athletes, why did I have to practice 10 hours a day on the courts of San Francisco when I was growing up? Says it all. Why did he have natural ability? Obviously he had natural ability. He was also 6'10", which helps, right? But, well, he was playing against Wilt Chamberlain, who was 7'2", so he was short. Okay, but what did he said something so important. You can have natural ability, you can have a lot of brains. If you don't sit and work hard and try to figure it out and break your head on a sugi and Gemara and then figure out how to learn a Rashi and get blisters on your brain from trying to figure out a Taisvus, nothing will happen. You can be as smart as you want. The Abish can give you all the potential in the world. But if you don't express it, then nothing's going to happen. Right? Just a smart person who didn't work hard enough. Right? There's lots of those around. And there's also lots of people who aren't necessarily so naturally smart, but they really, really work hard, and they learn a tremendous. I'm talking in the context of Torah, and they learn a tremendous amount and accomplish unbelievable things in their Talmud Torah. Are they as blessed as their chavrusa? No, but they work harder, so they get it better. It's just the way it works. I don't know why. That's God's fault, but that's the way it works. Okay. So shtus. Shtus is transcending intellect. Now, there's also shtus that's lamata. There's shtus that's just dumb. That's what we learned about in the 3rd chapter, that I might let my subjective reality overpower my objective intellect, and therefore I'll act in line with the subjective desire, and that's not smart. Right? I'm subjugating intellect to emotion, which is never a good idea. Right? The shtus zu haru l'mayla min hadas, shehu madrega gavaya v'nifla b'ma'od ma'od, which is an incredibly lofty level. The ish, now the Rebbe is going to explain the connection to a marriage, to a wedding. The ish v'isha, those two words, man and woman, in this context, husband and wife. Hare zachu, what do Chazal say? If they merit, hare shchina shruri b'neihem. The shchina rests amongst them, between them. It's interesting, in the context of the Aish that we're talking about, the rest of that Chazal says if they don't merit, then there's a burning fire that devours them, meaning a marriage is something that can be unbelievably powerful in its goodness, or unfortunately, it can also be something very powerful in the pain it can cause. Right? I mean, that's also true because it's such a powerful union. So it can be powerfully positive. It can also, unfortunately, be powerfully negative. It can cause real emotional pain to people because it's just not working. That's not that's not an easy situation to be in. So ish v'isha hare zachu hare shchina shrui b'neihem. The ish, the word ish is what? Aish with a yud. The isha, who aish, is the word aish, which is fire, with a k. So together, what are they? Kasher zachu, when they merit, when they unite in a positive and successful way, az harehem yud-k. They're the fire of yud-k. Shechina, God. Uba begilu, and this comes in a revealed way, a binyan adayad, an everlasting edifice, meaning that the marriage lasts. Im came. How does Madrega Gaved? It's a very, very lofty thing. A chuppah is a very powerful event. A wedding is a very powerful event. Who understood this? Who saw the godly fire that was being created at this chasana? Shmuel bar Yitzchak. And that took him to a place, l'mayla mitam v'das, objectively, in some cool, calm, and collected way. He wouldn't have necessarily danced, and I mean, when he was sitting and learning and he understood something, he didn't get up and start juggling hadas. That's okay. And I don't know whether he even high-fived this chavrusa. I think that's something relatively new, but okay. Shalom knows that that's all, you know, it's all the white guys trying to be black guys, you know, high-fiving after they, you know. But the blacks are onto something else. Once the white guys do that, then the black guys are doing that. So the white guys start doing that. The black guys are doing something else. I mean, they're always a step ahead in being cool. That's just the way it is. But the white guys try to catch up. They never quite. It always looks a little forced. You know, a white guy saying, "Hey, bro." Oh, yeah, right. Come on, give me a break. Like, "Hey, bro." Right. Good. Good. Black guy said it. Sounds good. It's good. White guys, it just sounds like, you know, some white guy trying to be a black guy. Okay. So Aish is the burning fire of the revelation of godliness that's being revealed by these two people, but in terms of their union. And Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak saw that and was elevated to a level beyond tam vadas, beyond rational, intellectual, cool, calm, and collected behavior. But not in a way that was an emotion overcoming his intellect. It was a level beyond intellect overcoming his intellect. Emunah, faith, is a power beyond intellect. Emunah is that which allows you and I to connect to a level of godliness that's beyond the ability of intellect to understand. Etzem and neshama, the essence of our soul, is a level beyond the powers of our soul, which include intellect. And intellect is definitely the most impressive power of the soul that's part of conscious reality. There's no question about that. And it's housed in the most sophisticated part of the body called the brain. There's no question about that. Okay, that's true. But there's something beyond that. What's that? Well, we talked about Ratzon and Tainug before, earlier in the Maamer. There's also a third level, Emunah. Third head of the crown. Ratzon, Tainug, and Emunah. And what's that? That essential connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the Jew has. That's completely beyond intellect. Ratzon is something that can be understood intellectually. I usually, you and I know why it is we want something. Usually. Not always, but usually. There is something called a taiva, which is completely beyond understanding, and that happens. You know, you'll walk in on a hot day and have a taiva for a cup of tea, even though you're red in the face and sweating. Okay, so that's like hard to understand intellectually. I get the glass of cold water, that I get. The tea, I don't know, I just have a taiva. And you'll say, I just have a taiva for a cup of tea. I don't know why. Okay, fine. But most of the things that you and I want, we can explain rationally why it is that we want them, right? It makes sense to want that. Even though the Ratzon is coming from a level higher than intellect, it resonates in intellect very, very simply. Emunah allows you to connect to a level of reality that is completely beyond intellect and can't be explained intellectually at all. The essence of God, can't explain it. Are you connected to it? Yes. What allows for that connection? Emunah, not intellect. Intellect doesn't take me there. So there's certain levels of connection to the Eibusher that demand a person to transcend their intellect and not be limited by their intellect. We talked about it. It came up in shiur the other day, and I think it was in the Gemara. It came up when we were learning Hesach Hadas. Right? We're learning about Hesach Hadas in benching and a new bracha and Borei Pri Hagafen. Right? That what's Hesach? So Chazal say Ein ben David ba'ela b'Hesach Hadas. Mashiach only comes if people, so to speak. I mean, simple pshat is stop thinking about it. So the Rebbe asks the obvious question, especially the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who gets people thinking about Mashiach all day long. What does that mean? So the Rebbe says, it's not that you don't think about it, it's that your relationship to the idea of Mashiach is l'mayla mitam v'das. It's beyond das. Right? How do you build the Beis HaMikdash? Atzei shitim. Shtus de kedusha. You want to be stuck in intellect? I'm not going to get out of Golus if I'm stuck in intellect, because the whole idea of Mashiach is l'mayla mitam v'das. The whole idea of the world reaching a state, it's somewhat magically a state of perfection is l'mayla mitam v'das. That doesn't make sense. You'd think, what do I have to do? Well, I have to, devise some political system that works so that everybody is happy. Okay. Been trying that for a while. Is that the way to bring about the perfection of the world? No. The way to bring about the perfection of the world is l'mayla mitam v'das. It's connecting to a level beyond mitam v'das. That's Mashiach. In Ben David ba'ela b'Hesach Hadas. So that's the shtus of Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. He sees the fiery revelation of godliness that's happening in a chuppah. And Bezrat Hashem, you will merit in the right time, that should be relatively soon, to stand under your own chuppah. But you will probably be so distracted by the whole event that you won't really appreciate under there. You're going to be so spaced out, like, whoa. Okay. When is it that you appreciate the kedusha of a chuppah? When you're a little more, less. It's not that you're less involved. It's not you. When you're standing under there with your children, you will appreciate that this is basically one of the holiest places you've ever been. It's Gan Eden, right? Under the chuppah is a taste of Gan Eden. So the chassan and kala are so spaced out, they have a hard time. I mean, they don't even remember the whole thing. Do you remember being under your chuppah? I don't remember. What happened under there? Who knows? Right? Okay. But your children's chuppahs? Now you have a while to wait. Don't worry. It's all right. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow. First find her, and then have some kids. And you'll be surprised how fast it happens. Much too fast. Right? So you'll appreciate being under the chuppah when it's not you. You can have a certain perspective on it. And it's unbelievable under there. It really is. It's partially unbelievable. Bez Hashem, next time we get to do it, my wife and I, we're done with our kids, so we'll hopefully we'll get to do it with some grandchildren. There's some 16, 17-year-old girls out there, we're just, they have a competition not a competition, they have a question between them, which of them is getting married first. That's what the two of them talk about. Right? They both think the other one, right? Not that they would, that's their, it's a reasonable thing for a 16, 17-year-old girl to think. But I can't even imagine what that's about. That must be something really wild. Okay, so that's where Shmuel bar Yitzchak chapped. Because of this level, because Shmuel Bar Yitzchak was sensitive to this level of revelation of godliness, he was zeicha, he merited these tremendously powerful levels of revelation, the afsika muda denara, that there was literally a pillar of fire between him and everybody else at his levaya. And evidently everybody saw that. And look what the Rebbe says in the next line, it's so interesting. Shezeh bechinas gilui or, there's a revelation of light, but gilui mamish. Mamish revealed. Well, what does that seem to indicate? Seem to indicate there could be a level of gilui or that's not begilui mamish. Gentlemen, there's a level of gilui or that's not begilui mamish. In other words, there's a revelation of godly light that you won't necessarily see, but it's happening. Well, we learned in our Maamer every time we do an avoid of iskafia, so we bring about a revelation of our Sevev. Do we see it? No. Is that revelation real? Yes. So revelation doesn't necessarily just mean that I see it. Revelation means that there's a certain level of godly presence that's very powerful and very healthy for the world. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a kli to see that at this particular point. Because things can be revealed even though I don't see them or experience them. What's an example of that? Well, there are all sorts of radio stations relatively close to us that are revealing radio waves that are reaching this place and are revealed in this room. Right? There's an active revelation of those radio waves. Right? Are they revealed to us? No. Why not? Well, I'm not a radio. And I don't have a radio. But if I had a radio, I had a little transistor radio. Hadn't seen one of those for a really long time until we went down to our bomb shelter during the Iranian fireworks. And we're sitting down there with neighbors. So we see all the time, but I mean, you see them in a different light when you're sitting in a bomb shelter together when some guy is trying to blow you up. So one of them was a pretty, he's a pretty simple guy. He's very bright. He's just a very simple guy. So he's sitting with a transistor radio with a thing and one earphone in his ear. When was the last time you saw someone sitting with a transistor radio? And he's listening to the news, like what's happening. So, wow. When was the last time you saw someone sitting with a transistor radio? So there he was with his transistor radio in the miklat, and he had reception. Okay, what else is this room full of? I assume it's full of Wi-Fi, right? I assume it is. Something somewhere is revealing Wi-Fi in here. It's taking an act of revelation, right? It's not like it's just happening. Something's making it happen. But you and I aren't aware of it. Why not? Because I'm not a smartphone. I might have a smartphone that's picking it up so I see the little lines. Oh, okay. Good. So then it's being revealed to me. Is that what's happening now? I can't see it. I can't see my lines. Am I using data? Am I using Wi-Fi? I don't know. All right. Okay. The data also, same thing, right? It's coming from somewhere. Whatever company I use, right? So they're sending out all this energy that this thing picks up. You and I don't. My eyes don't see it. My ears don't hear it. My nose doesn't smell it. Is it revealed? Yes. So there can be revelation that's not begilui mamish. And then there's revelation that's begilui mamish. They saw this revelation of Elokus in front of them. Every single one of them saw that with their physical eyes. Ubir Inyan, the Rebbe explains. Ihine, Or Ein Sof, the infinite light. Hareles machshava tfisa beichlal. No thought can comprehend it. There's levels of godly reality that are beyond intellect. What does that mean? It's beyond the geder. A geder is a definition. It's a fence, right? Meaning a defined reality. It's beyond the definition of hasoga, comprehension. It's not that it can't be comprehended because I'm not smart enough. It's just not something that can be comprehended. We'll talk about that in a second. The kol hasoga, every level of comprehension, hine gamma yesin ailis, even the highest level of intellectual comprehension, harehu begetter hasoga al kol panim, it's still within the context of and the defined reality of an intellectual idea. Because what does intellect understand? Ideas. What doesn't intellect understand? Emotions. Intellect has a hard time understanding emotions. The only way that intellect understands emotions is by virtue of the fact that you and I experience the emotion, and then somehow intellect can talk about it, right? So all sorts of people wrote poems about love, right? What are they trying to express? They're trying to express in an intellectual form a completely different experience, an emotional experience, not an intellectual experience. An idea, you can express an idea in words, that's what words are for. An emotion, hard to express in words. Right? That's why usually when there's people that you love a lot, you might say to them, I love you. That's a good thing to do. Right? But you also might give them a hug. And that hug means a lot more than I love you, because something is said in the hug that just can't be said in the hug. You know, when you arrive at the airport and your family comes to greet you, I don't know whether you pull out from your pocket the poem you wrote on the plane. And dear Mum, oh, how I missed you. You are so special to me. I thought of you every day. So nice to see you now. I don't know whether that's what most... What? No, poems don't have to rhyme. Come on, you have to get more. You know, if they don't rhyme, you're even more sophisticated, right? Okay, so good. Dear Mom, how I love you so. The amount that I missed you, you cannot know. Okay, you want me to keep going? Fine. Okay, so that's not what you do. What do when you see a loved one in the airport who came to see you after you haven't seen them? You give them a hug, right? No, you don't go, that's not what you do. They do that in Hollywood. That's why they don't know what emotions are. They're all messed up. You give them a real hug. You don't make a show of it. You just give them a real, quiet, subdued, not, no, that's not what real people do. I mean, children do that. Adults don't, right? I mean, there are 50-year-old children out there. Fine. But a hug, why? Because it expresses something that can't be expressed in words. It's beyond words. That's what a niggun is. A niggun is a hug. That's why most niggunim don't have words. Sometimes you just can't express it in words. So you sing a niggun. You want to give the Eibishter a hug, you sing a niggun. It's called kulmus nefesh, the quill of the soul. When the soul wants to say something, what does it do? It sings a niggun. The kol hasoga, nigam yesin ailis, how you begetter hasoga? Aval masha eina begetter hasoga. 6 lines up. That which isn't in the realm of comprehension, hari efshar sheyutfas basoga klal. It can't be understood by intellect. Intellect is a wonderful thing, but it's limited to what? Ideas. Intellect is good at understanding ideas. It doesn't understand anything else. Why? Because those things aren't begetter hasaga. They're not about understanding. Right? The simplest and clearest example of that, which many of you have heard many times, and I apologize, explain intellectually the color orange to someone who was born blind. Can't do it. Why not? Orange is not an idea. Orange is a visual experience. He's never had a visual experience. That's not part of his life. So you can't possibly explain to him what the color orange is. It has nothing to do with intellect. Right? Now you can, no matter how loud you talk, he won't understand you, right? You'll say it quietly and he doesn't get it. Then you'll get louder. No! It's like, people who don't speak a language trying to make themselves understood on some foreign street. Where is the... If you say English loud enough, they must understand you. Where is the Eiffel Tower? What? Right? They know what you're talking about, but in Paris they won't let on. Right? Okay. Because the intellect's limited. So too in our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We want our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu to be based solely on intellect. Intellect plays an unbelievably important role in that relationship. But if we want that to be the be-all and end-all of the relationship, then we're not serving God, we're serving our intellect. I've posited my intellect as God. Whatever my intellect understands as reasonable and plausible, so that's what I'll do. So God is my intellect. That's what defines reality. No. It's not what defines reality. The Torah defines reality. And the Torah says some things or asks things that are often not intuitive in any way, shape, or form. I wouldn't assume that's a reasonable thing to do. Okay, that's the way it is. So what difference does it make? If God said to do it, so then you do it. Right? It's reasonable. It's not reasonable. What's that got to do with anything? Right? If you know God said to do it, then you do it. It's reasonable to wrap yourself in leather straps and black boxes every morning. That's a reasonable thing to do. I don't know. Pesed, you can explain it within the context of what a mitzvah is, etc., etc., etc. Okay, but ultimately that's coming from a place beyond reason. Also, walking around with strings hanging out your pants is not necessarily the most normal, rational thing to do in life. Okay, Pesed, but that's what we do. Why? Because God said, wear a four-corner. If you're wearing a four-corner garment, put tzitzis on it. So we wear four-corner garments and put tzitzis on it. Okay. Normal? I don't know. Normal. It's normal if you're Jewish. I think it'd be pretty funny to see someone else do that. So the Eibishter is beyond intellect. So if we want to touch him, we have to get beyond intellect. Then we have to bring that into intellect. Ukadisa b'sefer shel beinanim. 5 lines up. Perek Yud Ches, 18th chapter, the beginning of the discussion of Mesiras Nefesh. From the 18th chapter to the 25th chapter. Legave HaKadosh Baruch Hu, relative to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, L'mayla mina seichel v'das, who's beyond intellect. He's allowed himself to be clothed in intellect, that's called the Torah, but he himself is beyond intellect. V'leis machshava tvisa bechlal, and no thought can comprehend him. Hakol, everyone is kipesim. A pesi is an idiot. Etzloi, use Baruch. Everybody relative to the Eibishter is like an idiot. What does that mean? Someone who doesn't understand. Kidichsiv. What does David HaMelech say? David HaMelech was a very, very intelligent and well-learned person. What did he say about himself? Ani bear. Bear is like a boor. V'lo yeda, and I don't know. Bahamis hayisimach. A behema I was with you, but it means that I am. I'm a behema with you. I'm like a behema. Vani tamidimach. That last clause seems to be somewhat contradictory to the first 3. And I'm always with you. I'm a boor, I don't know, I'm a behema, and I'm always with you. I mean, that way I would think that's why I'm not with you, because I'm a boor, I'm a behema. No, I'm always with you, David HaMelech says. Klaimar, what does he mean to teach us? This is David HaMelech. There's someone who knows everything there is to know. Shebezeh shani ber u'bahamis. That which I'm a boor and a behema, ani tamidimach. Why am I always with you? Because I'm not limited by seichel. Because I'm limited by seichel, there'll be places where I can't go, where you are. Because there's places where you are that just can't be understood. But if I can transcend seichel, I can get there. But if I'm stuck in seichel, I can't get there. Intellect. Seichel is intellect. Intellect is an amazing thing, right? But I mean, we've talked about this before. Intellect also happens to be the source of all evil in the world. There's only one creature created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that can do something against his will, and that's the one that has intellect. Lions don't. Snails don't. Cockroaches don't, as annoying as they are. Right? Cockroaches don't do anything against the will of God. They have this little chip, and they're just supposed to run around and annoy you. Like they're going to show up and then disappear into the wall before you can step on them and hear that wonderful crack that means you've done the job. Nope, he won. He's gone. Right? Okay. When's he going to show up again? Who knows? And you're always worried it might be on your bed. Okay, fine. Cockroach does something against the will of God? No. Mosquitoes? No. Humans? Yup. Why? Because they have this thing called intellect. which on one hand is the most precious gift they've been given. On the other hand, it's the source of all evil. There's only evil in the world, evil being an action that is not in line with God's will. The only creature that can do that is called a human. Cheetahs chasing after antelope and, whacking them so their legs go out from under them as you're rooting for the cheetah to win in the National Geographic special. You're rooting for the antelope to win, right? So the cheetah ends up catching him and he bites his throat until the thing dies. It can't be a nice way to go, though they say they go into shock very, very quickly, so they don't really. Okay, so we hope that, because the poor antelope, beautiful thing, right? So he grabs him by the neck and schleps him under the tree and then eats him for the next week. He goes out to get another one just for fun because he likes killing antelope. No, that'll be it. He's not, you could, I wouldn't suggest walking by the cheetah, but if he's got the antelope under the tree, he's probably not going to touch you because he's really not interested because he's not hungry. Right? If his kids are right by, if her kids are right by, she might decide that you're dangerous. But he finds one and kills it. Humans go with guns and blow their heads off, and look how many, and put antlers on their wall. They don't even eat a thing; they just leave it there. Right? Only humans would ever do that, and they do worse. Right? Okay, that comes from intellect. So intellect is an amazing thing. It's also something that I have to transcend. So the Rebbe says, now this is the Rebbe telling us, the Rebbe pretty smart and knows a lot and uses intellect a lot in his service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he's using his intellect now to teach us this Maamer. But what's he teaching us about intellect? In order to reach the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the highest level, it's through nullifying our will in a way that's l'mayla mitam v'das, that's completely beyond intellect. We do what we do not because it makes sense. We do what we do because the Eibishter said so. It might make sense, it might not. So that's called shtus. Interestingly enough, we'll see. We have a couple of minutes. We'll just see the beginning of this. Hopefully we can finish the Maamer tomorrow. A Navi, a prophet, is called a Meshuggah. Someone who's a Meshuggah, he's crazy. Why? What's Nevuah? Simple shot in Nevuah. What is Nevuah? Nevuah gives us access to information that we couldn't reach through intellect. If we could reach it through intellect, I don't really need Nevuah, right? Okay, so Nevuah connects us to a level beyond intellect. So what happens to the Navi at the time of his prophecy? Everybody but Moshe Rabbeinu. He basically has something akin to an epileptic fit. He's on the ground, takes off all his clothes, and he's on the ground and he's shaking. Why? What does he have to lose connection to? Self, which includes his own intellect. And then he's a kli for something beyond him. It's wild. Shaya Navi laying on the ground naked, shaking. That's what they did. Moshe Rabbeinu, no. Moshe Rabbeinu was so holy that he could even experience it in a state of conscious reality because his consciousness was from such a high place. Everybody else had to lose conscious reality. Also, Avraham Avinu, it says, Avraham Avinu fell into a deep sleep. Now let's see a couple of lines in the explanation of Nevuah. Kamesha Kosev, this is Elisha. Elisha sent the Bnei Nevi'im to Yehu HaMelech. And Yehu HaMelech says when they arrive, Madua ba Meshuggah zeh. Why did the Meshuggah come? The Navi is a Meshuggah. Madua ba Meshuggah zeh. It's a pasuk in Nach. Yehu HaMelech. Tehine, be'esis galus and Nevuah. At the time of the revelation of Nevuah, Hayat Sarach Liyos, what had to happen? Hafshata Segashmis. Throwing off physical reality. Vahainu, hafshatas haseichel v'amides. Right? I mean, it doesn't mean I lose my arm. Right? What does it mean? My seichel, my mides, those aspects of me that are very important but also limiting, have to be done away with in order for me to be a kli for something beyond seichel, which is called nevuah. Again, if I don't I mean, that doesn't mean that there aren't things in the nevuah of the Nevi'im that make sense and we could theoretically understand without nevuah. That's true. But that state of revelation is a level beyond intellect. And the information is also beyond intellect. I would never, ever, ever come to the conclusion intellectually that on the 15th of Tishrei, the best, most healthy, holy, and amazing thing that you could possibly do is to take a green stick and a lemon and shake it. This would not come to that intellectual conclusion. Right? Even though I might have been in Mitzrayim and left Mitzrayim, and somehow it's called Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. I don't get why. What does that mean, Zecher? How is this Zecher? What's this got to do with Mitzrayim? Go live in a hut. Okay, the hut, it's Ananei Kaved or whatever. But there's no way you and I would understand that. So many pieces of the puzzle that are coming from a place completely beyond intellect. We might celebrate holidays. How? All the pratim, all the details, the basic idea might be something that seems reasonable, but all the details, I don't know. How would I know what the details are? I would know that I should eat matzah leaning to my left. Like that's the thing you do on the 15th of Nisan. How in the world would I know that? I would throw a party and probably drink a lot of beer. You know, like, we'll get some beer and some arbus and we'll have a big party because we got out of Mitzrayim on the 15th of Nisan. No, bad idea. Don't drink beer on the 15th of Nisan. Why not? I don't know. God said so. Chametz. Oh my gosh, chametz. Right. Hine Basi's Gals Nevayat Tzarich Liv Havshatas Agashmis. Hainu Havshatas Asech Vamides. Liyos, to be in a place but bechinas bittul shelamayla mitam v'das. Beyond tam v'das. Okay, we'll stop there. The Rebbe is now going to explain that they would take their clothes off when they experience nevuah. Clothes being an expression of self. When did clothes come into being? After Chet Eitzadas Tevara. Once they became aware of self, they put on clothes. They became self-conscious. They put on clothes. The Navi reaches a level beyond that, so he rids himself of his garments, his levushim. Oh, wow. And then he lays on the floor and basically shakes. Wild. Okay. The Rebbe's going to explain to us that that's how you build the Beis HaMikdash. And then the Rebbe's going to explain to us, okay, so how can we express that in our everyday life? And he's going to bring some of the most simple, down-to-earth, mundane expressions of that. And it's so amazing. After learning all these lofty ideas about the four worlds and Atzilus, etc., it's one of the four worlds. And Ruach Shtus, and Hislav Shus Nevishim Amis, all of the Chassidus that you learn, you end up, at the end of the Maamer, we'll see tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem, what the Rebbe says at the end. What does it all come down to? It's quite amazing. Okay. Have an amazing day. Next week we have a couple of classes also, so hopefully we'll pick some.